when I was about 10 years old, my parents got an actual house. Not an apartment, not a duplex, but an actual house. We were excited to move in, but it would not last long. At least not for me. It had to be the first or second day, and I was helping my father put boxes in the attic. He would hand up the boxes, and I would carefully navigate the attic via the cross beams and place the boxes in spaces where we put boards across the cross beams so they wouldn't fall through. Sitting up there waiting for the next few boxes to be handed up, I scanned the dusty darkness of the attic. In the back of the attic, in the darkest part, I saw a glimmer of light. It turns out that the glint came from the light reflecting off of a cage. This cage was your typical dog cage, but was big enough to easily fit a Great Dane or Mastiff or human. I told my dad about it, and he decided to get rid of it, but it was so big that it could not be brought down in one piece. I thought maybe we could just dismantle it and bring it down like that. I know these bigger cages have to be assembled. I would just break it down. Upon closer inspection, I realized that the cage was wired together. Someone had reinforced all the corners and door, and there was no way we were going to break this down without cutting it apart. I looked into the cage, and in one of the corners was a bowl and a spoon. Last time I checked, dogs didn't use spoons, so this struck me as odd. Even at 10, my dad ended up cutting it apart with wire cutters and threw it all away. Over and done with. The first encounter, we were settling in rather nicely. My sister and I had the rooms that we spent most of our first few weeks decorating and making our own. The house was cool too, but over those few weeks, I noticed that being in the house alone, or walking to the kitchen at night, had a sinister feel, like someone was waiting in the dark to grab me. I was 10, so I realized it could have simply been my childish mind making monsters up to justify my then irrational fear of the dark. But one night I was given absolute justification in these feelings. I remember it like yesterday. I was sleeping in my bed, the foot of which was closest to the door, my head against the wall. I was laying on my right side when I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I looked down, past my feet, towards my door. Standing there in my room was a woman who at first glance I mistook as my mom. It had to be 3 in the morning, and I was baffled as to why my mother would be standing in my room at this hour. As I scanned down the length of her body, I realized that the night light I left on in case I had to use the restroom in the middle of the night was visible through her legs. Upon this realization, I was flushed with fear and looked back at her face. This was not my mother. She stood there with a blank expression, dead eyes, and matted-looking hair, just staring at me. I did what every sane 10-year-old would do in that situation. I covered myself with my blanket and began to utterly freak out. After what seemed like forever but could only have been a few moments, I popped back out of my indestructible cotton force field to find that this woman had vanished. I wasted no time. I immediately bolted out of my room and in an absolute panic burst into my mom and dad's room like my hair was on fire. I told them what had happened, and of course, my dad brushed it off and went back to sleep. But my mom still remembers that night to this day. Years of activity. After that night, the house was never the same. I avoided going to the bathroom at night if at all possible. I hated being there alone, and if I had to have every light in the house on. My parents hated that. I know that other people saw stuff there as well. It wasn't just me. My mother and I were sitting out in the living room one night pretty late, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I went into the living room to watch TV. I guess it woke my mom up, and she had come to check on me. As we were sitting there deep in conversation, my father came busting out of their bedroom in his white tee and tidy-whities, screaming, "Where did he go?" My mom and I looked at him confused. "Where did he go?" my mom asked. A man was standing over me. I swung at him and my fist went right through him. He walked through the door out this way. My dad was freaked. "We didn't see anything," I said. My dad went back to sleep, and that was that. Over the years, things like that would happen. Shadow people. That woman would materialize and walk right past me while I was watching TV and whatnot. Doors would open and close on their own. Faucets would turn on and off on their own. Cabinets would open and slam shut. It was a full-on haunted experience, and I grew up in this environment. I was told by a psychic that I may be sensitive and that is why the paranormal activity was more obvious to me. But for sure others in the home saw things too. My mother would talk about seeing people walk by in her peripheral view. My then girlfriend, now wife, used to hear children laughing when there were no kids in the house. She and I heard a man laugh as if he were sitting on the couch right next to us. It was quite the place to grow up in. Years later, I don't know if it was being in such a heavily haunted place for so long or what, but it seemed that something happened to me in the time I lived in the home. I began to see things in other places as well. Things most people don't see. I always just chalked it up as another unexplained event in my life and moved on. But that house will forever and always be the place I came to truly believe in the paranormal and the possibility of the afterlife.